Hello and welcome to the big picture. Faced with unending criticism about the government facing a policy paralysis and the economy looking down, GDP growth stunted, inflation not coming under control, rupee depreciating to unprecedented levels, Prime Minister Dr. Mohan, who has admitted that we are going through turbulent times, has decided to act. The meeting on infrastructure called by him on Wednesday has come out with a detailed set of proposals to boost the infrastructure projects in the country. Some impressive targets have been set in various sectors like roads, civil aviation, ports, railways, power and coal. India is no doubt at a critical juncture amidst a rather gloomy global economic scenario. In such a scenario, will this initiative of the Prime Minister to accelerate the pace of infrastructure development going to yield results as expected? What will be the bottlenecks or roadblocks, if any, which can curtail these projects? Industry feels these are exciting times for infrastructure development, but wants a better policy environment. Is the government ready or geared up to provide this kind of policy environment? Today we will look into all this while asking the question, is India's infrastructure development poised for a major leap? To discuss this, I have with me today Mr. Shyam Poddar, Co-Chairman, Economic Affairs Committee at the PhD Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Mohan Guruswamy, Senior Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, and Renu Kohli, Senior Consultant, ICRIER, Ashok Dasgupta, Deputy Editor, The Hindu, and Dr.Praveen, Associate Professor at the Center for Economic Studies and Planning at the JNU. Welcome to all my guests. First, let me go to Renu Kohli. Renu, you think that the meeting held yesterday and the kind of targets which have been fixed by the Prime Minister for the various infrastructure projects, are they something which we think, you think it will be true? Is it a reliable target? Renu Kohli, can you hear me? Okay. Mr. Poddar, the same question to you.
Well,
are these targets which have been set, something which is which are reasonable?
We accept that setting a target is one thing, but implementation, that is the most important part. I will take away from this main question little bit away about the GAR. The GAR has become such a topic.
You're talking of the general agreement.
Yeah, that's the GAR. And which has damaged so widely to our economy, like your India-Pakistan confidence building measure. I don't know how much time it will take to build up a confidence of the FIIs to bring the money over here. On top of it, once you are doing that, after that, instead of rolling back, if you are putting the further insult to the injury by saying you are deferring it.
You're talking of foreign investments.
I'm talking about the foreign because why I'm linking this infrastructure. A foreign investment is a long-term investment which requires for the confidence, for the infrastructure. There is not a 1 year or 2 year investment. They have to plan out 10 year, 15 year investment for getting their return.
Right.
In the meantime, if you keep on changing your policy in between without any reason, then whole confidence has been lost.
Which policy are you specifically talking about? Changing of policy here.
Like a video code. After that, once you are saying you're okay, even 30 years back, you will be opening, then someday, next day you're taking that before April you are not going to open.
So okay. Let me see if I can go back to Renu Kohli. Renu Kohli, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. See, the meeting held by the Prime Minister yesterday and the kind of targets which have been fixed for the various infrastructure projects, do you think these are reasonable targets? Do you think these are targets which can be met in the next during the next 5-year plan? $1 trillion is the investment which they are talking about in this 5-year plan.
There's no reason why the targets cannot be met, because it is a need. There is a huge infrastructure deficit in the country.
Right.
And so as an economist, I would say that the targets are not unreasonable in and by themselves.
Right. Yeah, please continue. Okay.
But what I would like to just add is that the problem is not in setting the targets. The problem that India as a country faces is lies in implementation and execution of projects, and that's where we falter as a nation. And just delays in implementation, poor management and execution of projects leads to cost rising and delays. And that's what makes eventually you run up against a wall where the projects become unviable.
Okay. Praveen, Dr. Praveen Jha, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Praveen, see,
Yes.
everybody is talking about the implementation. So far, the criticism against the government was that, there's a policy paralysis, they're not really following up on things. Now that the Prime Minister has sat down on the task, has given targets, you think that now the criticism against the government that there's a policy paralysis should end?
Not really, because you see, setting targets is hardly actually a policy. Policy means also working out how it would get done, what
Right.
would be the roadmap, and so on and so forth. And on that level, I mean, there is a long way to go. Yes, targets have been announced, and in that sense, good intentions, but
Right.
as we know that very frequently road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Okay, Mohan, road to hell is paved with good intention. Is that the way you look at it? Or you think that something has been done and now let us wait and watch, give them some time, see that it is...
Well, I think, there's nothing new in this
Yeah.
targets. They're all part of the existing plan,
Right.
in the existing program. They're re-announcing it. But what yesterday we saw was, for the first time, a statement of purpose.
Right.
That we want to do something.
Right.
And we're aware of the problem and we want to speed up things.
And specific
Now-
projects, specific targets,
True,
specific...
those are all there already.
Right.
It's not something new. For instance, Kudankulam 2 is already there. The 2 ports in Andhra are already there. The 9,000 kilometers of highway is already there. Now they're saying that we want to take this up expeditiously and get on with it. Two of the earlier panelists have said the problem is one of implementation. All our programs are below, have exceeded their time limits and huge overruns. I think cost of overruns itself is about 150% the original outlays. Second is, as my immediate panelists who spoke before me said, the road to heaven are paved with good intentions. It's true. But now we have to see, we've got to give them a chance because this is the government we have.
Exactly.
And at least by appearing together yesterday and showing that they're concerned about this issue, they have, I think, given us a ray of hope that the government is going to wake up and do something. Agreed with the Prime Minister that there are issues which are beyond their control.
The global scenario also
Global
is...
scenario, all that is happening. But on the other hand, I would have been more comfortable, much more happier if they announced something brand new. For instance, they could have announced, say, a 1 lakh crore fund for upgradation of irrigation facilities all over the country.
Right.
They could have announced, a national sanitation scheme. The Planning Commission chairman has just been in the news over sanitation.
For sanitation.
And, we could have had a national plan for this. It's
Not
80% of people
not just in
India,
the Planning Commission building.
80% of people in India don't have access to toilets. So you could have announced something. These are all projects you could have done and, you said you create brand new investments and brand new work opportunities. I think they're not able to seize the initiative with new ideas and new policy initiatives. One way of looking at it is much of the same thing again.
Old wine in the new bottle.
Old wine in the new bottle.
Or if you want
say,
to be
let's take a
generous.
sip and see what happens there.
Okay, let me get Ashok Dasgupta on this. Ashok Dasgupta, you think that all these projects which have been announced, or as Mohan says, that these are all projects which have been in the pipeline for some time, and this is a new intention which is being shown. So you see, as far as the funding for all these projects are concerned, some of these projects are huge projects, 20,000 crores, 30,000 crores. You think the government will be able to provide the kind of funding, and where will the funding come from for all these things?
Well, I'm afraid that remains a question mark, because if we must look at all the decisions that have been taken,
Right.
we should look at it in perspective. First of all, why did the Prime Minister hold this meeting?
Right.
Well, we'll find that investor confidence was down. Not only global investors, but even our
Domestic investors.
business, the corporates at home.
Right.
And that was clear from the core sector growth going
Right.
down, the gross capital formation going down, our GDP growth going down.
Yes.
The fourth quarter GDP last fiscal was the lowest in 9 years.
Right.
Inflation is high, current account deficit is high, fiscal deficit is high, rupee is depreciating, our imports are costlier, diesel prices cannot be increased. So, the government is hemmed in by host of negatives,
Right.
and without any leeway to move around.
Right.
And because of this, there was this, criticism and general perception that the government, just cannot do anything. There's a policy paralysis.
Right.
Now, to show the people and regain investor confidence that no, the government is in action and is in a proactive mode, I suppose, these infrastructure industry ministers were called and these decisions were taken.
Right.
And you must have noticed that the stock market also,
Has reacted.
in response, went up by about, the Sensex went up by about 400 points
yeah.
or more.
That's right.
Now, the point is, if these are not followed through, that
Right.
is, if they are not implemented, then the stock market will again come down. You must have seen that the apex chambers, CII, FICCI, ASSOCHAM, they
Right.
have welcomed these decisions, saying
Absolutely.
they're very positive, but they are very cautiously optimistic because they are not very sure how they would be implemented and where the funding would come from.
Okay.
The Prime Minister himself has said that we'll have to depend heavily on the PPP mode.
Right.
Which means, the 12 plan stress is on developing infrastructure.
Okay.
And to the extent he is correct, the Prime Minister is correct, that when the GDP growth is down, the economy is not doing well, it is always better to invest in infrastructure development because it helps both in the short and long run.
Absolutely. Ashok, please stay on. I'll come back to you. Meanwhile, let me go to Renu Kohli. Renu,
I may add.
Renu,
Yeah.
the issue is investor confidence. Do you think these measures, these kind of meetings are going to renew the investor confidence? Yeah, as Ashok was pointing out, the stock market has indicated it, but in the long run, do you think the investors are going to come back with this kind of initiatives being taken?
Well, certainly it is a response to the bad situation, economic situation, and rightly so. And in that sense, it is a very positive step that the Prime Minister has taken, and the statement does does convey to both domestic as well as foreign investors that the government is not unresponsive to the situation.
Right.
The second thing is that, let me just correct the stock market. I don't think the stock market response is to the PM statement. All over the world, stock markets
Yeah,
have
exactly.
risen, and the response is to an expected
Right.
liquidity easing by a couple of advanced countries' central banks.
Absolutely.
That aside, I think that in the nature of things, very often, in a spate of bad news, a little bit of good that has happened or is going on is often lost and buried. I think it's important to highlight that. And in that context, I would like to add about the funding bit and the reliance on PPPs. Let me just say that as far as the public-private partnership experience is concerned, India has actually been a huge success story, A. The second thing, B, I would like to say that the road sector awarding of projects or execution, implementation is quite a positive story. And therefore, I have absolutely no doubt that in the forthcoming year as well, there is no reason why the road sector should not do well.
Okay.
Third, to go back to a bit to the power sector.
Right.
The power sector was also actually a very big success story until
Right.
some months ago, and that has run into supply shortages, and therefore that is being addressed. And last of all, I would like to say that the Prime Minister's statement was also, the Prime Minister's meeting was also an urging, an attempt at leadership of bringing all the concerned ministries together and urging them to work in tandem.
Right.
And that's a big issue or a drop or an impediment to infrastructure projects, because the various ministries
Working at cross
coordination,
purposes.
does take time. At
Absolutely.
times it is not.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, Renu, we need to go into a short break now. Please keep watching. We'll be back very soon. Welcome back. We are looking at the infrastructure in this country and asking the question, is it poised for a big leap? Mr. Poddar, industry always talks about better policies, better investor-friendly policies. Now that these kind of meetings have taken place, targets have been fixed, the Prime Minister is talking of PPP and things like that. What else does the industry want from the government to see that these targets are met? How will the private sector participate in this? Prime Minister has been very
main concern is one, the liquidity in the international market, though it is improvising. But the cost of fund in the India is still so high, and the disparity between the international rate of the cost of fund and the domestic rate so vast. So any investment.
What can the government do about it?
I am coming to that. First of all, if you talk to a banker, banker will say, okay, my deposit rate I cannot reduce. So if the cost of fund of the deposit is higher, obviously the lending will be also higher. Now, number two, the international borrowing may be more simpler. I suggested on a couple of days back, we have called a meeting with the Dr. Rangarajan in the PhD and having a good program there. I have suggested one thing, that why don't the government allow 10-year investment policy for FIIs, that okay, and you give the incentive on that. You bring the money without any sectoral cap, keep it 10 years. If you don't want to keep it, if you want to take it before 5 years, then no incentive. If you take after 5 years, no tax will be paid. So in that case, lot of money may come for the infrastructure also, with the confidence that their money for 10 years or 15 years investment will give very good returns.
Okay. Let me go to Praveen Jha. Praveen Jha.
Yes.
Sorry. See, when we talk of these kind of projects, inevitably the industry and many of the people also talk about investment, foreign investments. Are these major infrastructure projects completely dependent on foreign investments? Should they be dependent on foreign investments?
You see, the first thing is if you simply look at our own historical record, foreign investment has played a very small part even during the period of so-called economic reforms, liberalization, etc.
Right.
Two, in terms of desirability or viability and so on, again, I don't think foreign investment is going to play a very critical role, because the gestation periods typically are long,
right,
and most foreign investors are looking for returns which are sort of
Quick.
available within reasonably short period, quick
Right.
and so on and so forth. So I don't think you can really sort of try and entice them and so on. I think that probably is barking up the wrong tree. So we have to really depend largely on domestic sources of funding, and that is where I really see the problem, because as I said, these announcements are very good that we will go the PPP mode, and we'll kind of, are projecting something like 1,46,000 or different kinds of figures are floating over a particular time period and so on. But where will the money come from?
Exactly.
On the one hand, you're talking about sort of reducing the fiscal deficit, which basically means that you do not really want to spend very much more out of the government kitty.
Right.
In such a situation, where are you hoping these resources to come from? And if you notice, in fact, this has been the pattern now for almost 15 years or so. Frequently, we announce really kind of large numbers of possible investments and so on, and almost 80 to 90% of it is based on the hope that it will come from the private sources.
Right.
Without any sort of substantive
State governments,
exactly.
state governments also indulge in this global investors
Absolutely.
meet, show off
Yeah.
that that they have had
Right.
so many people wanting to invest, and then finally we know what is the percentage of investment which can place.
Absolutely.
Okay, Praveen, please stay on. Mohan, how do you look at this whole
first
thing?
of all, this feeling of despondency. I mean, we had one quarter at 5.4,
5.2%.
and 1 year of 6.5 or whatever, and for a country which grew at 2% and 3% for decades,
Right.
and only for one decade we touched 9%, and for this decade the growth is about 8%. This sudden thing, as if we've hit rock bottom, is ununderstandable. Second thing is that somehow that foreign investment will take care of all our problems is also ill-founded,
Right.
because FII money comes strictly for speculative purposes. It is a stock market
much of-
Sensex kind of thing. FDI is what we should be looking
Right.
for, and FDI
In infrastructure.
in anything
Okay.
is always, majority of FDI, 60 to 70%, there's empirical evidence for this, is Indian money. It round trips. Even in China, it's the same thing. So when Indians have confidence in their own economy, they start bringing the money back
Right.
through Mauritius or Singapore.
In
or
fact,
wherever.
nowadays the domestic investments are going abroad.
So they're going abroad. Even
Right.
today, I was reading while I was coming here, people are buying companies abroad.
Absolutely.
Matter of fact, we've been a net exporter of capital last year.
Right.
We should be targeting 60, 70
So
billion
how
dollars.
do you make these domestic investors to invest in India?
by getting a mood of confidence back,
Right.
by getting a feeling that the government is working, and a lot of this is imagery. What are we complaining about? We complain about a feeling of lethargy which is crept over government. And I think if Prime Minister has meetings like this once in 15 days to show that something is happening, and to push things and ask people to be answerable for their ministries, then we will get some results. This is an action.
Let me get Renu in because she needs to go. Renu, domestic, why are we looking so much at foreign investments? Why can't create atmosphere for the domestic players to invest in India instead of going and investing abroad? Is that a viable thing?
Two things, both are needed, domestic as well as foreign investors, and so it's not a question of just foreign. In the short term, yes, and why not? Why just in the short term? Actually, in the medium and the long run, also, India is a capital scarce country,
Right.
and that is reflected in both our current as well as fiscal deficits. So it's not just foreign investment. Currently, the currency is under enormous pressure,
Right.
and that has its own set of complications. It impacts the fisc, it impacts the current account deficit, and it impacts investor confidence. So there is a need to bridge the funding gap. So
And
that's the
and you
reason
think
I
it is-
don't think that we are only aiming at foreign.
Okay.
Pardon?
No, I was asking, you think that foreign investments will bridge that gap?
In infrastructure,
Right.
or for current account deficit, foreign
infrastructure.
investment is needed to bridge the current account gap.
Deficit, okay.
For infrastructure, actually much of the infrastructure financing, if you can see, has come from domestic sources, And there has been a lot of effort made and progress made actually to provide viability gap funding to bridge the gap for
Okay.
projects that are not viable. The government has established mechanisms,
Right.
institutions, and therefore, and that's what has brought the PPP forward so far.
Okay.
And there is no reason as to why that should not come forward.
Okay,
But I
thank
would
you.
like to go back to draw attention to
Renu,
the
we have-
macro.
Renu, we are
I
running
would
short
just
of
like to
time.
draw attention.
Very quickly.
Okay. All right.
Very,
okay.
very quickly.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Ashok, this gaps in investments, foreign investors looking, the whole, everybody talking about foreign investments. As Mohan was talking, FDI is what we should be looking for. What is your view on this? Okay, I think we have lost the, Mr. Poddar.
We are talking about the current account deficit.
Yes.
If you allow me, I can put some highlight because that is my core area.
Right. Very quickly, we are running out of time.
Why we are talking about the current account deficit? Because of the 2-3 things. Earlier, the current account deficit were bridged by the invisible receipts, which has come down drastically. The service exports we are not considering in the current account. Where is the IT? Is a big boost for the service exports. Invisible receipts, that has come down drastically. Now, all these factors if you club, and what was the reason for rupee sudden dip to 56 or 56.50, there is one of the major reasons that from 3-year lock-in period, the government has reduced to 1-year lock-in period for the FIIs.
Okay. I think we have, Mohan, last words to you. This, what has happened yesterday, and as you said, it has given a right indication. But do you think this will bring in more foreign investments into this country, and will the is this an indication of that infrastructure taking a major leap forward?
Economics is a thing of feeling good, or
Feel good factor,
or well-being.
Yes.
And I think the problem with us is that for a year or so we've been feeling that nobody is in charge.
Yes.
That things have been drifting.
Right.
And I think therefore government needs to assert itself and show that it's in charge of things.
Right.
It's coordinating things. Problem is that there's lack of coordination. One ministry clears something and
Other
MOEF
puts spokes into it.
Okay. All kinds of things. So Prime Minister has to take charge.
Okay. Prime Minister has to take charge, and he seems to have taken charge yesterday, but he needs to show more often that he is in charge. And as Mohan pointed out, coordination, and also my other guest, the coordination between ministries are what is important in seeing to it that all these infrastructure projects come to a fruition in a reasonable amount of time. Thanks to all my guests. Thank you for watching. Thanks Renu, Kohli, Ashok Dasgupta, Praveen Jha, Mr. Poddar and Mohan Guruswamy. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue on The Big Picture tomorrow.